Hi everyone, this is lesson 12 and we're getting into secondaries. As you know, primary adjustments, they let you work on the entire image like it's a global adjustment, but secondaries allow you to isolate and work on a specific part of an image. So for example, you might want to change the color of a car from blue to red without affecting the rest of the shot, or add warmth and saturation to an actor's skin. So we're going to use qualifiers and windows to do some secondary adjustments. So let's get to clip number 12 here, and we're going to do a secondary adjustment to isolate just the color of these pink helmets. Jump into the qualifier palette down in it's right next to the curves palette, so jump into qualifiers and make sure that this is in your qualifier. So if you do not have a qualifier selected here in this drop down, make sure you have the qualifier selected. Okay, so this qualifier tool allows you to select or isolate a specific part of your image based on the hue, saturation, and or luminance. So what we're going to do is click on the helmet, and you can see that the hue, saturation, luminance adjustment happened, but you don't really see anything happening here. To see what you've done and what you've selected, you need to highlight, which is this button right here, and show what you've selected. Okay, so right now I've chosen this, and this is what I've selected because that's the shade that's most close to what I clicked. So these parts of the image are in that sort of range of colors. If we wanted to add more colors to the selection, we'll go into our selection range tools and click on the eyedropper plus. So this is adding parts to our selection. Now it might be easier to add if we jump out of this highlight mode and jump back to our regular screen. So we'll click, and here you can actually click and drag over parts of the color that you want. And I'm going to zoom in quite a bit so I can make sure that I'm clicking and dragging on all of the parts of the image that I need. So now I'm going to go back to highlight, so view, highlight, and I'm just going to Shift H, highlight. I'll zoom out with Shift Z. So it's highlighted a lot of the helmet here and all that range, which I think is good. I'll Shift G, Shift H. Okay, so this looks good. Now I want to refine the matte just a little bit more. So I can actually jump into my hue, saturation, luminance in these parameters and adjust it. If I want to change the width of it, making it wider, meaning I'm going to start including more colors, I can do that. I'm going to bring it back to my width that worked for me, which was right around here, I believe. I can do center, softness, same with the saturation. I can include more highly saturated colors, or exclude, or include less. And lumens here, I can actually click and drag this range if I wanted to, or the edges to increase or decrease. Next thing I want to do is make sure that my matte, the selection here, is actually a clean selection. So right now I'm in my highlight mode. Let me jump over to my black and white mode. This is very similar to when you were looking in Fusion. This is the alpha channel, so to speak. So this is similar in the way that white means you are going to affect it, and then the black means you're not going to affect it. So let me clean up this matte here. Clean black, kind of scrubs away some of the white specks, and then the clean white includes more of the included parts. So makes that white part a little stronger. Okay, so I can also blur some of those edges. I can jump into the Matte Finesse page 2 and I can further refine it. So I can shrink this if I wanted to, so make it less. So make my selection less, or I can grow it quite a bit. I think this is going to be okay. All right. I'll jump out of my highlight mode. And now that I've got my selection, I can actually make an adjustment. So I'm going to do something very obvious. I'm going to go into the hue and roll it to the left till it's all the way down at 0. You can see that we've only affected the parts of the image that was highlighted white. Or if I jump over into this regular highlight mode, that is in color, or what's not in that gray part. Okay, so obviously this is not going to be clean because we don't have all of this little girl's helmet clean in there, so we'll go back to our qualifier, and I'm going to just click a little bit more in that area to include all of her helmet, and Shift Z out of that. Okay. Looks okay. So this is a secondary. We've isolated the image based on a certain parameter, which would be the pink color, and we've changed that using a color wheel to a primary corrector right here, the hue. Let's reset that. So by double clicking on the actual word, the hue, it can set it back to 0. Now what I'm going to do is actually create an effect where I just want to keep this pink helmet pink, and then everything else is desaturated to black and white. So the first thing I want to do is create an outside node. And to do that, go into color, go into my nodes, and I'll add an outside node. And when we do that, you can see that it looks just like a serial node. It's connected in that same way, but then below it, it has an extra connection here. And this is the matte output of this node, and it's connecting it to the input of this, the matte input of this new node that we created. So what that means is this outside node is taking the key that we've done over here, the selection of these helmets, this helmet area, and inverted it. So I'm going to click on this node 2, and when you'll see that, it will invert everything. So any adjustment that I do on this outside node is going to be outside of the selection here in this previous node. So I'll drop down all the saturation, and I will get out of highlight mode. And so everything, and play that is selected pink in this first clip stays, and this outside node is desaturated. All right, so that's the outside node. But what I wanted to do is specifically keep her helmet pink and everything else is black and white. So what I'll need to do is limit what selections I have in this first node. So I'm going to create a window to limit that effect. Then I'll also have to track it. So going to the tracker, I'm I'm going to move this back over here and make it a little bit bigger. Then I'll track forward, and it should stay on her helmet a little bit. Okay, for the whole thing. Let me get back to the beginning, and I'm going to zoom in, increase the power window so it fits her entire helmet. So when I hit play, it should fit over most. Okay, so that's good. So I'll jump out of this. And for the most part, it looks like it works. Everything in that clip is desaturated black and white except for her helmet. So we just use the combination of Qualifier, an outside node, and a power window with tracking to create this effect. So moving on to the next clip, we'll jump to number 8, clip number 8. We've applied some color correction on it. So the next thing we want to do is use a secondary to change the color of this little basket right here so that it matches a little bit more the bluish kind of tone over here. So we'll need to, instead of doing this qualification on this node, we need to do a new node because this is a new correction. We'll add a serial node or option S. So I'll first use qualifiers to highlight just this pink color. I'm jumping to my qualifier tab, and when I click on it, nothing happens. Now, if you look down in my selection range, I still have the add qualifier or the add selection tool here. I actually need to change it back to my main color picker. So that happens a lot. So if you are trying to qualify something and you're not getting any action, make sure you go back down to your selection range and choose the picker. Okay, so now that I've got my picker, let me click, and instead of just clicking once, I'm going to drag around. I'm going to hit Shift H to see how that selection worked. Okay, so that wasn't bad. Now, you're going to notice that it's going to be really hard to get just this selection here, so we need a window. So we'll use a power window to isolate just that selection. Now, instead of using a square or a circle, let's draw our own custom window. I'm going to take this tool right here, the one that looks like a fountain pen, and I'm going to zoom in on my image quite a bit. Okay. I'm going to draw a box shape over this area. So I'm creating curves by clicking and dragging. But if I just click and let go, then it creates a straight edge. I can further refine by clicking and dragging these control points over here and having it stick onto the box itself. Okay, so I'll hit Shift H to see my selection, and it's highlighted all of that. Shift Z to go out, and there's nothing else that's highlighted. Let me track, make sure that it stays on. Okay, and hit Shift H again. And let's move that color towards a cooler color. We'll also bring down the saturation maybe a little bit. Okay, so let me make this window a little bit bigger to see that. You see some little artifacts here and there. So we'll jump back into Qualifier, we'll add. And we're going to fix our window just a bit because our edges are, we don't have any softness here. So I'm going to, let me soften up just a little bit. If I hit Shift H, we can see the softness. I'm going to do an outside softening. Okay. All right. This is somewhat difficult because of the quality of the footage. It's highly compressed, but you get the idea here. Okay, so that's secondaries and qualifying and power windows and tracking them.